everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Banterly, the Gen Z podcast about pop culture, media, and everything in between. My name is Suha.
And my name is Aidan. And welcome back, everybody. This is a really special recording day for us because it's our first time meeting face-to-face, in person, in the studio. How do you feel?
Great. It feels like a real experience now, not just sitting at my computer in my parents' house. Like being in person, getting to sit in front of you and actually talk.
Yeah, it's a totally different feel. And it feels so professional being here and oh, we're really doing the thing. I don't really remember my first time recording in person, but I remember walking in and being really intimidated by the equipment. It's a whole thing, but it feels like a second home at this point now. So that'll be your second home pretty soon as well. Other than being here for the first time, what else is on your mind?
I am very sick of the very demure, very mindful trend.
Demure, very mindful. I don't come to work with a green cut crease. I don't look like a clown when I go to work. I don't do too much. I'm very mindful while I'm at work.
That might be an unpopular opinion, but I think it's becoming increasingly popular. I really liked it at first with the Jules LeBron and her being able to now finance her entire transition off of the fame she's garnered from it. But brands, companies, politicians, and people who just shouldn't have taken it, ran with it. And it's everywhere. It's not very mindful, very demure. It's very much loud and very annoying. But I just think it's everywhere now.
I don't know what it is about it, but I feel like it's spread like wildfire. And last week I was in Cape Cod, and on Tuesday, so less than a week and a half ago, my friend walked down the stairs and I was like, oh my God, you look very demure. And then she was like, what? That's a weird word. She had never heard of it. Flash forward 4 days, we're thinking about Instagram captions and Kim Kardashian used it. And I was like, you know what? If this was 3 days ago, I would have used it as a caption. But now I feel like it's everywhere now. And now I'm getting pitch emails at work, the very demure, very mindful new collection by so-and-so. I'm like, you guys, this just makes me want to not even respond to this.
I got a bunch of brand emails, and I think 4 in a row, the subject line said something along the lines of, look at our new fall, very demure, very mindful collection. I'm like, do you guys know what these words mean? And I personally hate it because I love the word demure. I've used it in my writing a lot. And now I'm I can never touch that word again. Jules LeBron was also invited very last minute to speak at the Democratic National Convention. And she turned it down, but she appeared on Jimmy Kimmel's show this week with RuPaul as the guest host. So it's incredible to see how quickly one thing like that can change someone's life. But it's also now at the point where it's giving Pokemon Go to the polls or Hillary Clinton dabbing. The trend cycle of it came and went very quickly.
It's like when your parents hear a cool joke and then they say then all of a sudden it's not cool. That's what's happening right now. Yeah. But it was cute while it lasted for 2 days. I really did enjoy it. I really did like it, honestly. Our question of the day today is, what are your thoughts on the book to movie pipeline when books get made into movies?
I don't know why my first thought of why does this sound like school to prison pipeline? It's not that. Very different. But that was my first thought. Anyways, I tend to like them. I think it's fun after reading a book and kind of imagining that world in your head to see how others could have imagined it. Obviously, sometimes it does live up to expectations. Most of the time it doesn't. But to me, the one that absolutely does and maybe even surpasses the book is Me Before You.
I'm running out of options for you here, Louisa.
Please, I'll take anything.
And this is new care and companionship for a disabled man.
It is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is so sad. The book is similarly very sad. It has Sam Claflin and Emilia Clarke. And I thought, compared to how the character was written in the book, she played her exactly as many would have imagined. The main character is meant to be very, whimsical in her dress and down on her luck in terms of the jobs she can get. She tends to, leave jobs very quickly, and I think Emilia Clarke really embraced that.
Do you have any experience of caregiving?
I've never done it, but I'm sure I could learn.
Then let's go meet Will. Will, this is Louisa Clarke. Nathan will talk you through Will's routines and equipment.
You don't have to talk across me, Mother. My brain isn't paralyzed. Yet.
And then Sam Claflin did a really good job of playing her love interest and the man she cares for empowered their relationship in maybe a way you wouldn't have expected after just reading the book. But that's one example of one that I really love. I know that you're not as big a fan of this, if I'm not wrong.
It's complicated for me because, unfortunately, I don't do a lot of reading for pleasure. I did a lot when I was little, but since college, I just haven't read a book for pleasure in a while. So I feel like I can't have a strong opinion on this because I just haven't read the book. I just have the me to movie theater pipeline. I don't have that me in my bed reading the book pipeline. But like I said, when I was little, I loved to read. And one of my favorite book series was the Percy Jackson series. I was obsessed with Greek mythology. I loved these books. When they were announcing that the Percy Jackson Lightning Thief was going to be turned into a movie. Oh my God, we're so excited. No. That wasn't a good movie.
There are 12 Olympian gods. Big three are the brothers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. The children of these gods were half human, half gods.
Hey, Mom. I thought this school was supposed to make things better.
Someday it'll all make sense.
Percy Jackson, we need to talk.
It's unfortunate that our generation got that because that really was a big part of my childhood and they were coming out. And this new generation has that new TV show, which I heard is really good. So I'm glad that they have that. But the movie just didn't hit for me. I feel like some things didn't add up to the book. I remember my expectations were not met.
I agree. I remember that because my brother was much more into Greek mythology than I was, but I was like peripherally interested in it. So I would like watch the movies and like I read the whole book series. And I think a huge issue is like, despite how popular Logan Lerman is, like still today as Percy, he was just too old for the role. And I think that caused a big disconnect with like the primary book audience of being 10 to 12 and then seeing like a 16 or 17-year-old play someone who's supposed to be in your age range. The Las Vegas scene is forever ingrained in my memory and I don't know why. I think it was just like a sensory overload of a scene.
To have fun.
Okay. Let's never leave. Yeah. Let's stay here.
No, I honestly bring that scene up all the time because if I'm at a restaurant with my friends and it's a strange vibe, I'll sometimes say, I bet when we walk out of here, it's going to be 2033. Because going back to that Lotus place where they come out and a bunch of time had passed. So I think about that. Think about it often.
That's fair. It's such a weird trend to see how good some interpretations can be and then how poor others can be. Today we're talking about It Ends With Us, which is a movie that recently came out that was adapted from a book. Before we really dive into the content and our discussion, we do want to issue a trigger warning that there will be mentions of domestic violence and physical abuse. And so with that, please proceed carefully, and it's okay if you need to log off. Totally understand.
So for anybody who hasn't seen the movie yet or read the book, it is a film about Lily Bloom, who is played by Blake Lively, who moves to Boston and brings to life her lifelong dream of opening a flower shop.
Hey, Lily, you want to do the honors?
No, you go ahead. I need to take it in from here.
I was hoping you'd say that, okay?
Oh my God.
Her father just passed away. She moves to Boston and she meets Ryle Kincaid, played by Justin Baldoni, who's a very sweet-seeming neurosurgeon. They fall in love.
That's my brother, Ryle.
The first official customer?
Well, you'd have to buy something to be considered a customer. Right now, you're just loitering.
And Ryle's sister, Alyssa, played by Jenny Slate, ends up working at Lily's flower shop. So they're all sort of intermingling and connected.
I want to see you again.
Now you see me.
You know what I mean.
That special connection you feel. That first kiss.
And Ryle and Lily's relationship soon turns pretty abusive.
But 15 seconds. That's all it takes to completely change everything.
I'm so sorry.
And it reminds Lily of her childhood because her mom was abused by her dad, so she grew up around it. And then a chance encounter with a former flame, a past love, Atlas Corrigan, played by Brandon Sklenar.
Hi.
Atlas.
Lily Bloom. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
What are you doing in Boston?
I opened my flower shop.
I still remember the day I saw you in the window.
Yeah, we were just kids then.
Is that,
really messes things up for everybody. And that's the story without giving away the ending.
And so with the release of the film has come a lot of drama, some of it drudged up from when the book was initially released, because the book has always kind of had some controversy assigned to it, but a lot of it also revolving around cast interactions, promotion. To put it simply, like, a lot of the cast right now is not getting on well with Justin Baldoni, allegedly, who also did direct the film. There's allegations that, like, no one wants to speak with him. He's not really invited to group events. They didn't take pictures with him at the premiere. But then that's based, I guess, a lot on potential creative differences that Blake Lively had with Justin Baldoni. But then in terms of the promotion, they're being promoted in very different ways, where Blake Lively has taken a more lighthearted approach of saying, girls, like, get your friends, get your florals on, go watch the movie. Whereas Justin Baldoni, whenever he does promote the movie, talks about it from the standpoint of, like, addressing what domestic abuse can look like. And so it's just been two very different approaches to the film that's clearly caused a divot within the cast and how a lot of the audience is now reacting to the film. So, Aidan, what are some of your initial thoughts after watching the movie?
I saw this movie a couple days ago in theaters, and I was surprised at how crowded the movie theater was. It was one of those AMC Tuesdays, but I had been to the movies a lot on those Tuesdays, and they're never that crowded. So I was surprised to see that many people there to start. And two, they were a very active audience, and I don't really like active audiences. They were laughing and talking and giggling, and like when he took his shirt off, they're like, oh my God, and everybody looked like they were 16, 17. I was, what's going on? So that kind of ruined my perception of the movie. I had seen all the stuff that's happening on TikTok and the controversies about this movie before I saw it, before getting into anything in particular. I think it was a better movie than I thought it was going to be, and I think people are being a little bit too hard on Blake Lively. I think some of their complaints about her are valid, and I agree with them, but I think in general, I was going into this thing, it was going to be a horrible movie. And yeah, the writing isn't good. My friend who I saw it with described it as a Wattpad fantasy come to life, which I agree with, but it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't like it. I luckily, like, my theater was pretty chill. I think we did not have an active audience. And I think active audiences can be fun depending on the context of the film. Like, when I saw Twisters and 4DX, that was really fun to have an active audience because we were all like, oh my God, this is a fun experience together. But I think with a movie that's rooted in such a heavy concept and heavy conversation, you don't want to hear oohs and like ahs throughout like a really unfortunate telling of a story. And so I can see how that would ruin kind of the viewing experience. Personally, I just didn't love it. Putting all the drama aside, I thought that the movie kind of lacked a clear message. And I don't know that it necessarily needed one, but it like brings up the conversation of like, how do we create films about really traumatic or abusive situations without glorifying it? And I think that what should be the center of the conversation has kind of been pushed to the side. And I think it's like rooted a lot, obviously, in like the promotion of the film, where Blake Lively has said like, get your girls, put your florals on and go. It's like, this is not the Barbie movie. We should not be promoting it in that same way. And I question, like, you said that there were 16, 17-year-olds. I don't know if this movie is for them, if they should be watching this kind of content, especially if they're not being offered resources or potential action items afterwards on how to like potentially address what they've just seen.
Like you said, Blake Lively told people to wear their florals to this movie, and she talks a lot about, in the press that she does, the fashion and the outfits and the boots that are actually her real-life boots, and borrowing Gigi Hadid's sweaters and Ryan Reynolds' jackets and all this stuff about the fashion, which before going into it, I was like, that's weird she's talking about the fashion so much. Then after watching, I was like, oh, you can't really not talk about the fashion. Lily had some crazy outfits, double pants, and all these patterns coming together. I was confused.
In no world does she pass for 23. And similarly, Justin Baldoni at no point passes for 30 years old. Like, that is a man well into his 40s. She's almost 40. We need to accept these things. And I think it's fine if like they took a creative liberty to maybe change the range of the film. Me and one of my friends did talk about that, which we can mention a little bit later, but they just didn't. The age thing never came up. Like you said, a lot of the background on Lily is kind of lost. So then some of the fashion choices are really confusing because she's carrying luxury and designer brand items, but she's allegedly a fresh college graduate, and her dad was a mayor. I'm sure does not rake in the dollars. So it was confusing, to say the least.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's strolling in with a Valentino tote bag and whatever, those Louboutin boots or whatever. I was confused, like, how old is she in the movie? And how is she somehow able to financially open up a flower shop in Back Bay of Boston, which is very expensive?
The outfits were very much giving Disney Channel, in my opinion. Like, the layers didn't really make sense. And honestly, some of her press outfits have done similarly. Like, she's really leaned into, like, the floral look. But sometimes it's very obvious she is her own stylist. The fashion and then, like, some of the casting decisions just, like, added to the fantastical nature of the movie that maybe it was not a goal of theirs to make seem unrealistic. A lot of the controversy around It Ends With Us as a book was that it overplayed or over dramatizes what domestic violence can look like. And it doesn't take into account that, like, in the movie and in the book, Lily Bloom is made to seem like a true victim or someone who kind of got herself into the situation, when that's not the reality for domestic violence survivors. There are not clear-cut signs. A lot of them are financially bound. A lot of them cannot escape. And so I thought that the book and the movie just didn't lean into that part well enough.
I cried a lot at this movie, and that's always a good sign for me, that it's like, at least you're pulling my emotional heartstrings and you can do that. I liked how it wasn't like this is a battered woman who's getting beat every single morning, every single day. Like, it happened a few times that we saw. And when I first watched it, I don't even want to admit this, but I felt a little bit, oh, like, Ryle's not that bad. That's how I was thinking. I was like, oh, he's nice. Like, it was an accident. Like, it was a hot pan. He reacted. And then, like, I thought that she accidentally fell down the stairs until we saw the later scene that she was pushed. But it's like, it only happened 3 times. I'm like, he's not that bad. And I think that they were doing that to kind of make us in the mindset of people who were in those relationships, like, oh, it was an accident. Oh, like, it's not that, like, it only happens to me once a few months. It's not like it's happening every day. They showed a different type of abuse versus like, oh, this person's getting black eyes every morning, which is horrible. Like, they're both horrible. Both sides, like, nobody should hit anybody even once. So it's kind of messing with my brain. Like, why am I like, Ryle's so like Justin Baldoni? Like, he's so, like, it's like, you know, all these things were going through my head when I was watching it. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, Aidan, this is bad. He should not have done that even once. It messes with your head a little.
No, it absolutely does. And I think that portrayal of the abuser was really interestingly done. I think they just built out Lily Bloom in a way that didn't do justice to the reality that, like, domestic violence survivors experience. Like, it treated it as a love triangle when the reality was, like, this woman needs to escape an abusive relationship. And I think that was part of the problem with the promotion as well, was that it was promoted, at least on, like, Blake Lively's side, as a love triangle of, like, oh my God, who's she gonna pick? Who's she gonna end up with? That is not what we should be rooting for after watching this film. Like, the goal is this woman leaves Ryle, period, and, like, does not end up in another potentially abusive situation. Do you think that the film risks romanticizing abusive relationships by branding itself as a rom-com?
I think that's a tough question. I don't think a romantic comedy in general is all just flowers and rainbows. And, like, I think they can touch on hard topics like domestic violence. Just because it's rom-com, it can't focus on serious things like that. In my head, I'm like, I know that this is not how it really looks like. Maybe some people experiences this, but the whole dramatization of it all and the outfits and he was running after her and he like it was all, I'm taking that into account when I watch it. But that's just me. And maybe if the 16-year-olds sitting behind me probably were like, oh my God, like, this is how it is. And so I think it depends on where you come from watching it.
I think it did romanticize it in some ways because after watching the film, I did not think it was a rom-com. I thought that Alyssa and Marshall were some comedic relief at points, but, like, that's just a story driver in every film. I don't think that qualifies it as a comedy. Like, Lily Bloom was not a funny character. Ryle annoyed me. Atlas was not funny at all. There weren't plot points that were very funny, except for, I guess, Ryle being a neurosurgeon, which Lily laughed at for 10 straight minutes, and her name being Lily Blossom Bloom, which that to me is just poor writing on Colleen Hoover's part. Like you said, I think for those 16, 17-year-olds, it's very easy to maybe take a movie like this, and maybe even for people our age and older, to see that and be like, well, you know, love hurts. Or I think especially for older generations, there's still stigmas around like issues of divorce or like separation. So it's like, oh, if it only happens a few times, like forgive and forget. So I think there was some romanticization or like potential loopholes for the audience to walk away from it being like, oh, it was just a movie about how love can look different in different situations. At least she ends up with the right guy at the end. Or that's like what we're meant to assume. But that's just not the reality. It leads into a conversation of like, should movies and books about domestic violence be made? And if they are made, do they have a responsibility to provide like clear action points? I didn't see like a blank screen of like, if you're in trouble, reach out here for resources, which I honestly expected to see.
And like little Netflix episodes, it's like they'll let you know and they'll give you resources right away.
Exactly. Me and my mom just finished watching The Crown. In any episode that talked about Diana's eating disorders, it always started with first a trigger warning and then clear list of resources. Like, if this is something that you or a loved one is struggling with, here's who you can reach out to. This film had neither of those. And I think that was a clear-cut problem, too. Because for a lot of people still, they don't go to the movies knowing what a film is about. So you could just see a movie poster of Blake Lively against a wall of flowers and be like, oh, this looks cute, this looks fun, let me go watch it, and then potentially leave very triggered. With all of that being said, are there any pieces of media you think have represented domestic violence maybe in a more well-rounded or thoughtful way than this movie did?
Not to bring it up one more time, but my favorite TV show, Glee, I think covered this subject pretty well. I mean, there's no perfect way to do this, but similarly to how Lily Bloom thought that I've seen what domestic violence does to a family. I will never let this happen to me. She never thought she'd be in a relationship like that. And then she was, which shows that, you know, it can happen to any of us, no matter how strong you are. And a similar thing happened in Glee with the character Coach Beast, who was abused by her, I think he was her boyfriend at this time, but I think they lived together. And same with that, like Coach Beast was such a strong, dominating character that when she showed up with a black eye at school one day, I think Puck joked like, oh, did your husband hit you, blah, blah, blah. But he joked that because he thought it would never be possible that someone could even touch Coach Beast. But really, she was behind the scenes dealing with this. And then Will Schuster, the teacher, for anybody who lives under a rock, was like, you got to leave him. And she did, but then she went back. And it just shows that no matter how strong you are, you really can't know unless you're in it. I think that's just the moral of the story for any media like this. And I think that did a good job of showing like, oh, Coach Beast is this really strong character, and she left and she went back and she left again, and it shows that the journey is a windy road to get out of a relationship. It's not just like, you can't just tell someone, why didn't you leave him? Like when Lily asked her mom at the end of the movie, like, why didn't you leave Dad? She was like, it was easier to stay and I loved him. Like, oh, even saying that just gives me chills, because I think that sums it up nicely, because you never know until you're in it.
I 100% agree. I think one that did a really interesting discussion of domestic violence was A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini, and he's also the author of Kite Runner, one of my other favorite books of all time. But I think he wrote about domestic violence in a way that showed the true power imbalance that can come with it. Like you mentioned, how difficult it really is to escape, and how it can be something that from the very beginning, some people find themselves in abusive relationships. It doesn't often always come at some sort of an arc or a gradual increase. And I think it also showed the necessity to forgive oneself, because unfortunately that is a fight that a lot of victims have to experience, is an internal battle. And I don't think we got to see enough of that with It Ends With Us. A lot of the times abusers double down, or they are unwilling to change their ways or change their actions. That's not to say that's the case for all of them, but it almost made it seem like it was Lily's job to forgive. And I think that's a really unfair assessment or additional burden to put on DV survivors. So I think that's why A Thousand Splendid Suns to me was a true reclamation of oneself and reliant on the community that was there for her the entire time. So, after our discussion, do you think you would recommend this movie to other people?
I think I would explain my thoughts about it. I wouldn't just be like, oh, you're going to see this great movie in theaters right now. I'd be like, hey, the writing's bad, the story's so-so, it covers some heavy topics, but even when I said just then that it gave me chills, it still moved me in a way. And I feel like if you're interested in that type of thing, then yes, go see it. And I hope that maybe, I know that Justin Baldoni said that if someone was in the audience and they are Lily Bloom or they're dealing with this and they think, oh, it's not that bad, or how do I leave, to know that there is a way out. So I hope someone saw this and got something good out of it. How about you? Would you recommend it?
I don't think I would. First, because I don't want to widely recommend it, not knowing potentially what people's personal situations are. I don't know what that you could go in wanting from that movie that you couldn't find elsewhere, if that makes sense. There's a million other rom-coms, I'm saying that with quotations, that I would recommend in its place. There's a million series pieces about DV that I would recommend in its place. So I just don't think this film necessarily fills a gap in media or entertainment that I couldn't find a replacement for it somehow. It's unfortunate that our first conversation in studio in person was a little bit heavier, but I think it is really interesting to have not necessarily conflicting perspectives, but definitely different ones on the movie and maybe what it meant. I think we generally agree on the press could have been better, but yeah. No,
it was a good conversation, and it's nice to see you in person to talk about. And you're wearing florals today. We didn't even point that out.
That was not on purpose. Okay, I did not listen to Blake Lively. I promise.
Well, share your thoughts with us about the movie if you've seen it, Banterly at immigrantlypod.com, and engage with us on our socials at Immigrantly Media on Instagram and at Immigrantly Podcast on TikTok.
Banterly is produced by Shay Yu, written by us, the co-hosts Suha, Musa, and Aidan Taylor, and the executive producer and editorial review is done by Sadia Khan.
Our sound designer and editor is Lou Raskin. The Banterly theme music is by Simon Hutchinson, and additional music is by Epidemic Sound.
See y'all next week.